The operation is over. The real game is just beginning. In the first week of January 2026, the United States executed one of the most dramatic foreign policy moves in recent history. U.S. forces conducted a targeted operation that resulted in the capture of Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's controversial leader, along with his wife. Headlines exploded. Social media went into overdrive. Governments around the world scrambled to respond. But here's what almost nobody is asking. What happens now? Today, we break down the U.S. strategy, both stated and implied, and explore how it could reshape the future of Venezuela, the region, and global power itself. What just happened? To understand what comes next, we begin with the big event. In the early days of January, U.S. forces carried out a targeted operation that led to the capture of Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Maduro has been charged in U.S. courts with drug and weapons offenses. But the mission was more than a courtroom exercise. It was part of a larger campaign, one that combined naval deployments, strikes on suspected drug trafficking vessels, and increasing pressure on sanctioned oil shipments over several months. What we're seeing now is not a singular event. It's the opening chapter in a much larger strategic narrative. Washington's public framework? So what has the United States officially said about its next steps? Senior U.S. officials have emphasized three pillars. 1. Legal accountability. Maduro is being held on U.S. federal charges, and prosecutors are moving forward with court proceedings. 2. Security and drug counter-trafficking. Washington frames its actions as part of a long-running campaign against narcotics trafficking, labeling cartel networks linked to Caracas as threats. 3. Energy and economic strategy. Senior U.S. policymakers have floated plans to tap into Venezuela's vast oil reserves. Recent statements envision selling millions of barrels of oil on international markets under U.S. control, with the stated aim of benefiting both Americans and, eventually, Venezuelans. Taken together, these elements form a policy triangle that spans justice, security, and economic leverage. Diplomacy and transition. But strategy isn't only about enforcement or markets. It's also diplomatic. In recent days, Venezuela's interim leadership, under Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, has signaled interest in resuming diplomatic ties with the United States. U.S. officials have echoed this possibility, noting plans for a phased resumption of embassy operations and preliminary discussions on technical engagements. This hints at a dual approach: pressure through legal and economic tools, and opening limited diplomatic channels to manage transition and reduce instability. That's a common strategy in international relations. Combine leverage with dialogue. Energy and oil control. Energy is a central piece of this puzzle. Venezuela has some of the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. That's why oil has constantly been at the heart of U.S.-Venezuela relations. After the capture of Maduro, the U.S. announced plans to market millions of barrels of Venezuelan oil indefinitely, and discussions with major oil companies are underway. But experts caution this won't be easy. Some U.S. oil executives say Venezuela is currently uninvestable without major legal reforms, investment protections, and infrastructure reconstruction. Still, both sides appear keen to use energy as a bargaining chip, either to stabilize markets or to exert economic pressure. This ties back to a larger strategy, using economic levers as a form of geopolitical influence. Balancing forces, diplomacy versus sovereignty. Another central challenge for Washington is how to manage sovereignty concerns. Many governments and international bodies have raised alarms about the legality of the operation and its implications for state sovereignty. If the U.S. aims to maintain global legitimacy, it must balance assertive policy with diplomatic engagement. or risk alienating not just Venezuela, but other nations watching closely. Furthermore, Washington's handling of diplomatic engagement with Venezuelan leadership will shape how other regional actors respond in the long term. Long-term outcomes and uncertainty. So what could happen next? There's no single path, but experts generally outline a few broad scenarios. 1. Gradual transition with U.S. influence. Here, the U.S. uses legal authority, economic leverage, and limited diplomacy to encourage a transition toward more open governance. 2. Continued economic pressure. This would involve maintaining sanctions and control over oil exports until political reforms are secured. 3. International pushback. Some nations may object to U.S. actions as breaches of international norms, complicating cooperation on broader global issues. 4. Institutional weakening or fragmentation in Venezuela. If domestic governance continues to struggle, the country could face deeper instability. All of these scenarios point to one thing: uncertainty. Even the best-laid plans can evolve as domestic, regional, and global variables shift. Here's the key takeaway. The United States is navigating a complex strategic landscape in Venezuela. Its next steps will likely combine legal enforcement, economic policy, energy strategy, and cautious diplomacy. This isn't a simple military or political operation. It's a long-term geopolitical engagement with ramifications far beyond Caracas. That's why we're here, to help you understand not just what happened, but what comes next.